Niger's bold decision to seize control of its uranium from Uranium marks a seismic shift in the balance of resource power, challenging historical dynamics of foreign dependency and heralding a new era of economic sovereignty. The recent decision by Niger to take control of its uranium resources from the French nuclear force company Uranium marks a pivotal moment in the geopolitics of natural resource management. On Wednesday, Nigerian authorities announced they had taken control of the nation's Sommer uranium mine, Uranium, which owns 63 of the nation's mine. It should be recalled that in June, the French multinational Uranium announced in a press release that the military governments in power in the West African country had withdrawn the company's license for future development of the uranium mine, considered one of the world's largest deposits. As one of the world's largest producers of uranium, an essential material for nuclear agreements or energy and weapons, this move challenges long-standing agreements with foreign powers and multinational corporations that have historically dominated Niger's uranium industry. The implications are far-reaching, touching on economic sovereignty, energy security, and global power dynamics. Today's edition will delve into the motivations behind Niger's decision, as well as the potential economic and political impacts and the broader consequences for global markets and international relations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is a Talking Point over your Pan-African channel. Stay with us. It's always a pleasure to be in your company, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this day on 4U Media Africa in this edition of Talking Point, where today we focus on the West African country of Niger, where in the latest move, the Nigerian government has taken over the mine Sommer, of course, in the northeast part of the West African country from the French nuclear fuel company Uranium. And of course, we are analyzing today's topic of discussion in relation, especially at a time when we're seeing the Lobito Railway project taking place in a different part of the African continent. And to evoke this topic of discussion this day, I'm being joined by Dr. LAGOKE, who is Associate Professor of History at the Lincoln University and equally founding member at Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress. Thank you immensely, Dr. Nyaka, for joining us this day.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon, for the opportunity.
Permit me ask you to unmute your mic because I'm unable to hear you.
Can you hear me? My microphone is not muted.
Okay,
can you hear
hopefully
me?
You are going to unmute your mic. I don't know the problem of sound. I'm unable to get what you're saying, but it is a pleasure to have you on today's edition of the program. So to kickstart without further ado, in the course of today's edition of the conversation, well, we debut with this first question. How did you welcome this recent decision by the Nigerian authorities to take control of their uranium resources, which is key in the country's revenue, as well as is key for the country's economic growth?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please proceed.
Okay. It is a good decision, and that is the right thing to do. And I think that that it should be the trend for all African countries, because yes, we want the unity of Africa. We want Pan-Africanism, but Pan-Africanism needs to stand upon several pillars: a cultural revolution and the economic sovereignty of Africa, which means that Africa needs to be in charge of their own resources, and the resources need to be exploited for the benefit of the African masses and the African people. So I welcome that decision, and I would like the government of Niger to go beyond that, to do more. And I want to see most of African countries do the same thing in every sector of the economic life of Africa.
Thank you immensely, Dr. GNAKA. Now we just got indications that Boniface Harrison has just joined us as in his capacity as the Executive Director of MUEMACTION Post, joined us all the way from Kenya. Thank you immensely, sir, for joining us this day.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, and apologies for the little delay. It's a very much pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. I was discussing with you, a co-panelist, and to kickstart with you, or continue with you from that end. Now, looking at economic sovereignty, given this recent decision by the Nigerian authorities, the country's economic outlook, as projected by the International Monetary Fund, has actually been growing positively as opposed to previous years, and of course it is expected to continue in that light come 2025, maybe with about 8.8%. Now, given this economic outlook, which is actually favorable and is being linked to the country's oil exports and favorable agricultural season, as well as the lifting of sanctions on the West African country, how can this Nigerian decision, this new decision in the West African country to reclaim control over its resources, reflect a broader effort to, assert economic sovereignty? And what kind of challenges might arise from this latest decision?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And I think my philosophy has been that if, as Africans, we want to achieve economic sovereignty and full control of our resources, we must exercise a lot of confidence in ourselves and actually exploit our resources to the fullest. Because the biggest challenge with us taking control of our resources has been our capacity to actually make them useful. You find that sometimes we have gold, we have uranium, we have oil, but I don't know what happens that we do not believe or we don't have the capacity to make it an end product. So I trust that the Niger government will be able to process their resources to an end product such that they can handle the entire chain of production of that resource to the end, because economic sovereignty will not be achievable if there is a point where you can't do it. And we are not ruling out collaborations, we're just voting for collaborations that will not be exploited. So if Niger gets the adequate capacity, the adequate confidence, because sometimes we have the capacity, it is just a matter of not believing in ourselves. We can do these things, we can make our resources and even export them by ourselves. If they go that direction, it's going to be a momentous moment for them, and that is going to be a great pathway to development even in other areas of society, like employment creation, healthcare, roads, infrastructure. That's going to be a game changer. But now they have to lead the entire value chain, because that has been our problem. We have miners. The people who mine minerals in African countries are usually the local people. But who processes those minerals? They are processed abroad, and they are sold at higher costs. Sometimes we even have to import them. So if we go that direction, we saw the decision that the president of Burkina Faso was taking. He, at some point, chased away some foreigners who were exploiting minerals from their country. But then his plea was that instead of them establishing industries abroad, they established those industries in those countries. So I don't see that as a remedy, because we're just localizing what has been there. It has been processed. It's like, for example, when we see some things which are labeled made in China, but the companies are established in Kenya. So we don't want that. If Niger has chosen to control its resources, let them do it fully and have enough control that they can actually stand and ask and actually take credit of the profit that they get out of it. So that would be my view about it being a progressive measure. Capacity, control, the entire value chain so that you can claim autonomy. Thank you.
Thank you to Harrison for that input. Of course, it's worth noting that this comes at a time when there has been this renewed call on the African continent for African nations to be able to, take control of their own resources. Now, Dr. GNAKA, given the global energy market, now, we know that according to statistics, Niger's uranium exports accounted for about 4% of the global output that was being, sent into the world market for energy or nuclear energy. With these recent decisions, what are some of the implications that will come as a result of this decision that Nigerian authorities have taken? And of course, how would that impact the global market, given some of those countries that are dependent on uranium coming all the way from the West African country for their own nuclear energy?
The most important thing here, Boniface gave a general overview. The most important thing here, this is what I'm going to add and insist on. It is about freedom from the shackles of economic neocolonialism. That is the conversation here. And then when African countries decide to free themselves, in the world today, we have a declining Western world, which cannot claim to be the sole hegemon of world and economic political affairs. And then we have the rise of the BRICS countries, composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there are many other countries that join the BRICS countries. So countries that want to trade with different blocks or different countries have the power of freedom. They can decide to trade with the West, or they can decide to trade. They can decide to trade with the BRICS countries, with any other country in the world, which does not belong to the Western world.
Exactly.
So I anticipate, or I predict that Niger is going to put more emphasis on countries that are outside the Western world, maybe China and India, and then certainly Russia. And then also they want to give the opportunity to the French or to the Western world, if they still want to have the end product of the nationalization of the uranium product in Niger, if they come with new terms, with new agreements, definitely is going to be for the benefit of Niger. And then the 4% that everyone is talking about, it is based on the calculations of the French, who were the sole controller of the exploitation and the exportation of the uranium of Niger. So my position is that this is what we need to do. And then beyond the exploitation of the uranium, we need, like I said in the beginning, we need to see that in every sector. And even as I continue to speak about that, there is something that we are not seeing. I read a little bit, maybe I need to read more, but I don't see how those multinationals are controlling the resources of Africa. We don't see like documents, a manual that can expose the exploitation of Africa, of African resources by the international, by the multinationals. And this is how we can also raise the awareness. Because for Niger to succeed in what it is doing, Niger needs the support of the masses within Niger, and Niger needs the support of the popular or the public opinion of the African masses. And this is how, and with the support of international partners, we can find within the BRICS nations. So that will be my answer to your question.
I would like to stay with you, Dr. Nyaka, especially at this point, and it's a call for all African countries, like you mentioned, to be able to, reassert some of the deals that they have with some of these multinational companies in a bit to understand what implications this has on the economy of the country, and especially as the country advances towards growth and development. Now, looking at the geopolitical aspect of it, we're seeing this uranium that was coming all the way from Niger and was being supplied to most countries in Europe, especially France. Now, with this latest development, how might this alter some of the relationship that the country has with the former colonial master, the European Union member countries, as well as other global powers that were dependent on this mineral that was coming all the way from the West African country, especially in the wake of the historical significance that the company had within the West African sub-region?
Yeah, it is a paradox, and it is an aberration, and it is inhumane, to see what is happening. And then the case of Areva, now renamed Orano in Niger, it is the epitome of the disastrous economic relationship Africa has with the West, because we are talking about the uranium exploited by a French company to serve the interests of the French market of the Europeans, to light up the houses and the industries and the businesses in Europe. But at the same time, based on the information that we have, the level of electricity in Niger was not beyond 20%. So sure, that aberration needs to change, and that's why we support the nationalization of the uranium sector. It is not our business to know how the French are going to adjust. What we want is that the resources on the soil of under the soil of Africa, or the resources on the continent of Africa, need to be exploited by African leaders. And that's why many Pan-Africanists are like me. That's why we support the revolutionary process in Niger. Burkina Faso, like BONIFACE said, they tried a little bit, but like I said, several sectors, copper, lithium, and then gold, diamond, many other sectors in the continent of Africa, most of them are in the hands of the multinationals. Now, if we do so, then it means that we need business. And then sometimes people say that, we don't have resources in Africa to fund our development. Come on. Why a country or a multinational is going to come and exploit a natural or mineral resource in Africa and give, let's say, 12% or 17% to the African country, and then they're going to take the bulk of the wealth that they got, from that mineral resource, and take that outside the country of Africa. And then when we need to fund the project, they're going to come and say, what, they're going to give us loan. Why we don't use our mineral resources as guarantors for us to mobilize the funds we need to fund our own development? So these are all the conversations that we need to have, and it is about time. Niger is doing it. Mugabe tried to do that in Zimbabwe, and it was destroyed. They crippled and they destroyed the economy of Zimbabwe. But today, there is a new shift, there is a new trend, there is a new era, and then voices are rising, and people are expressing the desire for Africa to have economic sovereignty over its resources. We will see that in Niger, we see that in Burkina Faso, we're going to see that in Mali, and then we are seeing that in some other parts, in Botswana, but even though it's a different method. But this is what we need to see. And the Senegalese government is also having the same conversation with the multinational and the European. This is what we need to do. So that is my position on that question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyaka. Now, moving forward with you, Harrison, you listen to your co-panelist, and I'd like to pick up from where he stopped. Now, speaking of developments, given that most of these companies do benefit from, the output from this minerals on the African continent, what strategies? Because on numerous occasions we've cited that if Africa should be able to exploit its minerals, it should be for the benefit of the population. So, what what measures can the Nigerian government put in place so we, at the end of the day, we can see some tangible socioeconomic benefits that will be felt by the population, not just in the country, but equally in the sub-region, as a result of this latest decision, as the country has decided to be able to take control over its own uranium, which is its own resource?
Yes, definitely the nationalization of uranium mining needs to have felt impact on the lives of the people. Because, again, as we have mentioned before in this platform, is that sometimes the problems that we face as Africans are not only caused by the external forces, sometimes are also caused by the leadership that we have. So it is possible that such a resource would be under the control of the government, and still people won't feel the impact of its mining, because employment might be influenced by things like nepotism, tribalism, such kind of retrogressive vices. Other times there can be embezzlement of funds. So the first strategy is integrity and genuine interest in improving the lives of the people of Niger, because these resources should benefit the people and give allowed, because sometimes you find that with the new infrastructure that will be put in place, where, for example, if uranium used to be processed, some processes used to be done abroad, now those processes have to be done locally and with better working conditions, because a lot of times foreign companies misuse and the local people, they pay them poorly, the working conditions are not healthy. So that should be the step towards improving the lives of the people, because now people are free to control the resource, and we have our own who are actually in charge of the entire production. So better working conditions should definitely come, including better wages and healthy working conditions. The other strategies I mentioned before is integrity, in terms of how the resources will be utilized and put into action to create better infrastructure, and to even, because sometimes you find that miners have been allocated some amount of money, but it is not what they end up getting. Some people in the process want to eat some amount of money, pocket it, put it in bank accounts so that it can continue getting interest. Such kind of selfish behaviors are the ones that do not make any change. That's why there is the analogy of that when the white colonizer left, they left us with the black colonizer, who sometimes becomes a colonizer even without the influence of the white colonizer. So we should make life better for our people, definitely. We are also looking to have more investments in the neighboring area, because now people will have. I was sharing with a friend from Namibia, was telling me, due to the mining activities that they do there, people have a lot of money in their pockets. Every time they go to the mines, they are paid. They pass by places drinking, having fun, and we are looking to have more people in Niger having more money in their pockets, because the working conditions have to improve. So it means businesses will thrive, infrastructure like healthcare, amenities will thrive. The general lives of the people have to improve. What we should also be careful is, of course, uranium mining is a multi-billion investment, and interests are vested. So as my co-panelist was saying, there has to be a tactic to avoid the retaliation of the people who have been chased away from the business, because they might find ways, as we have seen, many areas in Africa that have such resources have been infested with things that we might not want to say, so that we do not look like we are praying for them to happen. But the strategies that we have used, we have seen foreign forces using to create chaos, to create division, among people so that they can continue gaining from places where they were exploiting needs to be actually prevented with foresight. I hope the people of Niger, the government, is very keen on that, because we have seen sometimes when investors are chased away, when policies are enacted that they don't favor them, people pour money, they even incite the public. You sometimes see people chanting in the interest of investors. They say they're losing jobs, or the country is not attracting investors anymore. So those things need to be very much taken care of, because this could be a good step towards prosperity, and then it is shortchanged along the way. It becomes another story, which might be unfortunate. So that is another point. And we're looking to have the general income, the GDP of the country, to improve, because unlike what used to happen before, now they will be extracting and processing everything by themselves. That is going to attract foreign exchange. I think for those who have been consuming uranium, they should still continue consuming uranium, because the Niger production will still put them in the flow. Because what I was mentioning about capacity, importantly, is we for example, where I come from, Kenya, we have a place where we have oil, but we have not been able to extract the oil without a foreign company. I don't know what could be the reason. I don't know, but that is a challenge. Sometimes when we are, you see the kind of statistics that uranium contributes in the world. So that is a challenge to Niger, to be able to meet those demands in the market. That, I believe, if it is left to the autonomy of Niger, is going to be a big step going forward into earning foreign exchange. So generally, having the production done in the country is a great thing, and it's definitely going to transform the lives of people. Thank you.
Thank you too, but I'll be staying with you, Harrison, just in line with what you said. Earlier on, your co-panelist stated the aspect of sanctions on countries within the African continent, notably he cited Zimbabwe, and other countries within the sub-region. Now, in this aspect of sanctions is not just felt in the West African sub-region. Could we say that sanctions are some sort of a geopolitical, but economic strategy to cripple African economies?
Yeah, what I can say about sanctions is sometimes this is my approach to making decisions at the major level, is when leaders make decisions about their country, they need to make them objectively. I'm opposed to the idea where when leaders make decisions that are political leaders like presidents and prime ministers make decisions that are affecting other countries, they tend to be dramatic about it. I think sanctions in the first place are, as I mentioned before, a retaliation of the foreign forces that were gaining from it. But also in our quest to gain liberation and freedom and autonomy of our own resources, let's also not be dramatic about it. Let us just do it because it is the right thing to do. Let us not keep on plastering it on people's faces, because the natural existence of humanity is, if you keep plastering something on my face, it's very hard to allow people to keep on doing it. So if, for example, a country X was gaining a lot from that uranium mining, and all the time the leaders in Niger are painting it on their faces, oh, we have chased you away, you will never come back to our country, you have exploited us. Those things are true, but why don't we pick from where we are and progress instead of starting, to me, unnecessary fights? Because what will mockery be of benefit? We should be talking about good people. You've been in our country for so long, we now want to take over our resources, but we are not cutting our collaboration ties. Let us work together. Be our customer. Now you are at the receiving end. Now be our customer, buy uranium from us. We don't want to see a case where people are causing drama, because drama is definitely going to often bruise to something bigger. So while we highly discourage and condemn the use of sanctions to intimidate African countries, we also encourage our African presidents and leaders to be objective to issues. And I know of a very well-celebrated leader in Africa but I think to a certain extent, he used to pick fights that to me look unnecessary. It's good to fight for freedom, but it's not also good to keep on fighting too much when you already should be doing the work. So let us avoid side shows. Yeah, let us avoid side shows and focus on controlling uranium, focus on production, focus on improving the lives of the people of Niger, instead of making it an unending victory. It is victory, it's done, let's keep the work going. If people impose sanctions, the world will see that these are people who are now the ones who are brewing the chaos. Let us not be people who are brewing the chaos. Let people brew the chaos and we fight back. But I think we have a lot to do as Africans in terms of the kind of challenges that we face, that we should be very focused on development, undistracted. Even when people put sanctions, it is not a must that we work with them. We can as well do trade. So there are very big countries that are already sanctioned by other big countries, and they're still thriving. So we should not be intimidated by sanctions. We should stand our ground and do everything that we can to ensure that our people are benefiting from our natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you too, Harrison. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is a talking point, and today we're focusing on the West African nation of Niger. Well, the country has decided to take over its own resources. Now, proceeding with you, Dr. GNAKA, you listen to your co-panelists, and of course, like Harrison was stating, it's imperative for Africans to note that at some point there is need for collective effort in a bid to counter this issue on the African continent, especially as Africa is headed towards its own transformation. Now, in your perspective as an expert, how might this recent decision by the Nigerian authorities influence regional economic integration, given there has been this renewed call for Africa to boost intra-African trade amongst themselves?
Yeah, before I answer your question, I just want to say something about Boniface Harrison last answer. The fight that we are conducting in Africa is multidimensional. Sometimes I hear friends or people telling me, oh, people African, they should stop talking. They should focus on the development. But when a country or an agency or an entity or countries, agencies or entities are attacking you, they're trying to damage your image, you have to respond. So our battle is a multidimensional battle. We are fighting to have the right to control our own development. We are fighting to have the right to choose our own paradigms. We are fighting to have the power to choose with whom we want to trade. We are fighting to improve the image of Africa. We are fighting to dispel all the negative ideas about Africa. We are fighting to destroy every propaganda put out there against Africa, the African leaders, and then against our spirit of self-determination. So when you have that in mind, it is not just an economic battle. It is a political battle. It is a battle about the image of Africa. It is a battle about the culture of Africa. It is a battle about the values of Africa. So we have to have that in mind, and then so that we can see the multidimensional battle that we have to fight in our desire to be free. So when we have BBC, RFE, Voice of America, all those international media presenting an African country as a loser, presenting African countries as people who do not know how to control their own affairs, while we know that when Ghana became independent, Kwame Nkrumah said that we want to show to the world that the African is capable to, to manage its own affairs. So we have to have that in mind. That is the first thing. Now, the second thing, we need to put emphasis on the real, authentic Pan-African integration of the continent of Africa. That's why we appreciate the fact that Niger, Burkina, and Mali have created a confederation of the Sahel states. There is no way a country is going to stand alone in Africa, stand alone against the multinational forces or against neocolonial forces. Today, Niger, Burkina, and Mali, they are taking advantage of a shift in international affairs with the consolidation of the BRICS countries, with the world that is shifting from a unipolar world to a polycentric world. We see the awakening of the Pan-African consciousness. These are all the factors that give the opportunity to African leaders, be in Mali, Niger, and Burkina, be in Senegal, in some other parts, even in Chad, to try and say, okay, or to the French, we do not want the presence of your military bases in Africa. And number two, we want to be able to control our own resources. Only in unity can African countries survive and strive. So that's why what we see in Niger, Burkina, Mali is fine, but it should need to be better. It has to be done in a coordinated way within a new Pan-African vision, and then the Sahel state can be the driving forces, of that new integrated development that we want to see on the continent of Africa.
And that is it. Africa has a role to play in on development. Thank you. That was Dr. NGAKA. Now, Harrison, you listened to Dr. NGAKA on that point, and picking up from there, indeed, Africa has a key role to play. Now, let's shift away from what's happening in Niger. We've seen the launch of the Lobito Railway project lately, when we saw the U.S. president who came to Africa and had a summit with the presidents of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Angola, where they discussed connecting these countries in a bid to transport resources from the African continent to the West. Now, away from that, when you look at this project, the railway project, given some pundits have been of the opinion that these are railway lines across Africa, they vary from region to region, meaning it's not the same in one region. Say in Kenya, for instance, it will differ from Kenya to Cameroon, and this hinders this quest for intra-trade on the African continent. Now, do you think projects like the Lobito Railway project and the recent decision by Nigerian authorities to take charge of their uranium, which is in their country, do you believe that some of these issues, some of the synergies, could go a long way in enhancing developments across the African country as well as the African continent?
Yes, definitely the development of one African country is going to result to the development of the overall Africa, and if we have such replicated in many other countries. But one of the challenges that we have in Africa is what Kwame Nkrumah was fighting for since the days when the AU was being formed, that we need to reach a point where African countries should speak in one voice and actually have collaboration that is meaningful and geared towards development. Because you find that some parts of Africa are aligned to different, sometimes foreign powers. So, for instance, we've seen cases where some peacekeeping missions have been sent to DRC, and we hear reports that DRC is accusing them of being accomplices to the war. The same thing has been happening in South Sudan. South Sudan recently rejected a delegation, a peacekeeping delegation that was sent to them, saying that some of the people who are causing the war are part of the peacekeeping delegation. So we have that disintegration of African countries. And the kind of relationship that African countries have amongst each other is something that needs to be changed if we are supposed to achieve collective continental development. Because the kind of restrictions that we put on one another in terms of trade, the ratification of the free movement protocol has been a whole discussion for almost a decade. AFCTA is still not fully achieved in Africa. You still have too many visas that are being imposed on goods and people. So this, in the short run, could be a very great development for Niger. And other projects across Africa could be very transformative in their respective countries. But in terms of collective African development, we still, especially the heads of states, need to come up with more sustainable policies and practices so that we can enhance the integration of trade across Africa. Because you'll find that for some countries to access Niger, for some countries to access DRC, there are not only the policy the limitations, but there are also political limitations for those countries. Because you can imagine, for example, the countries that have been, the heads of states that have been accused of being accomplices to the chaos and destruction and war that has been happening in DRC. What is their relationship with DRC? Are they benefiting in terms of trade? The big fishes could be harvesting the deals of the minerals, but does that impact the people positively? Is that inspiring Africa to development? So definitely the answer is no. We have situations where these minerals are benefiting a few, and we have a situation where the few are creating a chaos that is favoring them. They benefit from the chaos. So it could be one step if Niger can make a decision as a country. Like recently, our country made a decision to not have too many restrictions about visas coming to a country. We still have a small document, but it is not as procedural as a visa would be. So if Niger, I think these are recommendations that they can take. They can be leaders in terms of aspiring Africa intercontinental trade by opening boundaries, limiting policy restrictions, and even DRC. That will the movement of people, movement of goods, is definitely going to become something. Today, people refer a lot to the United States, and we can refer from history that the United States is a combination of many people from across the world, the Indians, the Africans, the Europeans. Everyone is in that society. And at the end, this movement of people is the one that creates a lot of development. When you see other countries that are developed in Africa, like South Africa, you find that there are diverse people living. So that leads to diversity and economic championship that is happening. So my view towards the noble steps that these countries are taking is that they need, because to whom much is given, much is expected. They have the most valuable minerals. They also have the responsibility of opening their borders and leading the way in showing that we have uranium, come for it. We have gold, we have diamonds, come for diamonds. Come do business here. Even if you don't want to do diamonds, Come build houses for the people who are mining the diamonds. Come build healthcare, because that is from the perspective of African development. From the perspective of the local development, that it is possible. So there are still those barriers that exist, but they are barriers that can be outdone. And sometimes it's because of alignment. At times we don't do very genuine moves as Africans, and that's why I become very skeptical of changes that are happening in different countries unless I scrutinize and find out that they are really genuine. Because sometimes you find someone has moved from one colonizer to the other. That's not progress. For example, if you've been aligned to country X and you have liberated yourself from country X, then country Y tells you now we can protect you from country X. You be aligned with us. Then you give us 1, 2, 3. You are still in colonialism. You are not yet free. So that has been a challenge. These foreign powers have proven, and I think we can agree, the reason why these foreign powers are always obsessed about Africa is because Africa has something in it.
Exactly.
So we must be very jealous about what we have, because if we are not very organized and strategic in the way we are going to handle these people, we will always move from one colonizer to the other, and we will never be free. The way the paramount chiefs used to be made in the past. You are lied to, you are brought clothes, you are given some money, you think you are on top of the world, then in a very short while they start coming for your farm. They start coming for the next thing. They start establishing military bases. The next thing, they will want to have their own president in your country. They will remove you as a president. So we should be very careful about these foreign powers, the alignments that we make, and make Africa work for us. Let us not restrict ourselves, each other from business. Like investors, African investors like Aliko Dangote was recently sharing that he has to pay and wait for many visas across Africa. Honestly, you see, not to categorize them people through class, but we shouldn't be doing this for everyone, even for journalists, even for great manufacturers, investors who are even Africans, still have to toil at the airports, even when they are known by everyone. Processes are long, processes are slow. I think also something that this uranium can help us to grow in Africa is technology. We need, as my co-panelist was mentioning, I don't know if it was him or you, that countries like Niger, countries like DRC, they are still very underdeveloped. And overall in Africa, we need to use these resources to bring technology, electricity to our people and ensure a culture of efficiency and productivity. Because that is the only way that money is created. Money cannot be created with ideologies. Money has to be created through hard work, through commitment, through working together. That, I believe, is the only way Africa has to can grow together in terms of inter-Africa trade. So we have to tackle those barriers. As I mentioned, the political barriers that we have across Africa and the policy barriers that we have across Africa. Political barriers are the usual unwarranted suspicion amongst one another, and the political alignments and the alignments with foreign powers. And the policy barriers are the ones that we have long and tedious visa processes that hinder trade across countries and relations at large and the movement of people. Thank you.
And that was a very impactful response there. Now, Dr. GNAKA, do you share the same opinion as your co-panelists? Why, before you respond to that? And do you believe equally that these projects on the African continent, as quoted by your co-panelists, is going to, increase trade, trade volume, and regional economic dynamics within the African continent towards ensuring that we have some sort of attraction of foreign investments coming into the African continent in terms of infrastructure and mining sectors within the African continent, so as to, foster the growth and development of Africa?
As we talk, your question was about the Lobito corridor. and then it has now the incumbent president of the United States, Joe Biden, went to visit those African countries and had a meeting with the leaders of the DRC, Angola, and the Zambia, and it's about that Lobito corridor that is funded by the European Union and the United States. And then one thing that, we did not get a chance to talk about is that we have to situate the context of that project within the reality of the war between the United States and China or Russia. As you know, China has developed that initiative, One Belt, One Road, and then Americans came, of the European, they came with that Lobito corridor. I'm not comparing the Chinese initiative with the American initiative, but based on what we read or what we read about the Lobito corridor, the Europeans want to link those three countries, or those countries, Zambia, DRC, and Angola, for the exploitation of copper and then cobalt and then many other resources, lithium, so that they can link those three countries' markets to the global markets. What does it mean? It means that, again, it is about the same exploitation of our resources. It is not about the transformation of the resources on the African soil. It is not about industrialization, or it is not about the industrialization of Africa. So this is for clearly, we know they said it. For the Chinese, we know the way they do the deals and then the loans that they provided in order to do some of the projects. One of them is that railroad that links Addis Ababa to Djibouti. It's more than 700 kilometers. People used to spend maybe like 7 or 10 days, 7 days, when they were, to link Addis Ababa and Djibouti as they were doing trade. But since the Chinese completed that project, it is like in 10 hours, they can link one point to another point. So these are the realities on the ground. It is not so about the fact that African countries want to leave one colonial power to go to another colonial power. We want to be free. Nkrumah, Mandela, Sankara, Lumumba, most of our leaders, all of them were fighting for the political and economic sovereignty of Africa. We want to be able to promote that African intra-trade, but there's something we did not put too much emphasis on. It is about those forces against Africa. It is not that we are so mediocre in Africa, but the forces put into place by the European after the independence of Africa do not want African intra-trade. They do not want the industrialization of Africa. They do not want Africa to be industrialized. And that is the reality. That's why they keep on extracting our resources to take them outside the continent of Africa for the exploitation or the transformation of those mineral resources that come back to us as a manufacturing project. And that is the pattern that we need to change. Niger can set the pace. Botswana is trying to do the same. Botswana has started that already. There are some other countries like Mauritius, they're trying. But now that as Niger is doing that in the context of breaking, it's like a connection with friends. We want to see them succeed. And for me, they can do many things, but one of the first things that they need to do is to provide electricity to farms, to families, to communities, and to people, to the streets. That is the first thing that they need to do. And now the rest, You know, they can do many other things, and then maybe for the electrification of many other regions in the region, as they come to have to bring together the different resources with Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. We want to see like a real industrialization of the Sahel state by an effective use of the uranium, of the gold, of many other resources in the region. And this is how we can say, you know what, this revolution is really bringing fruit, and it is meeting the needs of the people.
Okay, Dr. GNAKA, now moving forward with you, Harrison, you listen to your co-panelists. Now, I'm sure Dr. GNAKA, as well as yourself, will align with me that economic independence equals a true independence on the African continent. Now, in this regard, do you believe that this recent decision of the African country to take over its own resources, which is a call that resonates with other calls that have been made on the African continent for Africa to take its own destiny into its hands, is indeed a way to showing that the continent is headed towards its own true independence?
Yes, truly, I agree with you definitely that when Africa is able to chart its own way forward on the economy and being able to feed ourselves, that is real freedom, because we cannot have freedom when we still don't have food, when we don't have the money. Power without the money and food is not independence. And it's indeed a factual thing that we will be free if we'll be able to determine what happens with our economy. But there are a few things we have to do as Africans towards the realization of this freedom. And first of it, I think I've mentioned before, but I will say it again, is having belief in our own capacity. That the things that can be done elsewhere can also be done in Africa. Because for a long time, you see projects like constructions of roads, constructions of railways, even some public-private partnerships to improve infrastructure in different countries, are given to foreign companies. We have to ask ourselves, why do authorities in Africa prefer foreign authorities, foreign investors to Africa? Is it that we don't have architects in Africa? Is it that we don't have engineers in Africa? We do have engineers in Africa, and we have people who can do almost everything that is being done by people elsewhere. Because you go abroad, you go to these companies that are established in countries by foreign investors, 90% of the people working in those factories and manufacturing plants are Africans. So why is it that us as Africans cannot chart our own way forward in terms of development? And think, as we also believe in ourselves, it is also something that we also need to do, to actually be committed to working. Because you'll see a foreign investor who comes to invest in Africa is very committed on returns. They're very busy. They are working the whole week, including at night and even on Sundays. But sometimes, from a few observations that we may have made, sometimes we as Africans also do not give ourselves fully towards building our own continent. We need to be very passionate. We need to be dedicated about building our own country, and not believing that foreigners can do better than us. I think that's a mentality that our previous co-panelists would say, decolonizing the mind. We still have beliefs that roads that have been constructed by Japanese are the best in our countries than roads that are constructed by people who come from our country. And when you look at those roads keenly, you'll spot a difference. So why don't we? We have the education system. We have almost everything that we need to do. Why is it that we cannot do like what other people can do who come from outside Africa. So we have the capacity. We only need to decolonize our minds and actually actualize the potential that we have. We also need to embrace technology and innovation, because in most occasions you find that in our operations as Africans, we tend to rely and remain stagnant to old ways of doing things. I think as we suggested earlier on the issue of improving technology, supplying electricity to most places in Africa will enable more Africans to be able to innovate and leverage technology in most of these things, because sometimes the difference between us and the people who we think can be better than us is technology. You find that in Africa, for example, if you want to construct a house, you have to hire 10 people or 20 who will make the bricks manually. They will do a lot of processes for almost 3 months to get the bricks ready, when we already have technology that can work on bricks within a week or within 2 days. You have bricks ready and you have a house already being constructed. So those are the things. These things have not come to take us back or cause challenges such as unemployment. But these things are here to create more action being done. And the more things are being done, the more progress is being realized. Sometimes sticking to the old ways of doing things is not creating employment. It is actually being slow. Because you can imagine if today Niger has gained autonomy of uranium mining, and then they decide, instead of using machines to mine uranium, now let us employ more people who will be digging with their own hands and doing everything manually so that we can create jobs for our people. Do you think that is progress? That is not progress. It means that the market will be demanding more uranium when Nigeria cannot actually produce. So we need such technology, even in agriculture. We need to be able to embrace the latest technology and move with it and create. The good thing with technology is that it might look like it's reducing opportunities, but it creates a lot of things being done at the same time. And the more the things are happening in society, the more society is growing and the more opportunities are being created for everyone. So those are some of the ways that I think, and also as we enhance infrastructure, as we focus on electrification and opening of trade, it's important to also keep enhancing the education system in Africa, because education is a gateway to many opportunities in life. Even without education, we wouldn't be having a conversation about Africa. We wouldn't even know what people who are out of Africa want from Africa. So information will lead more Africans to knowledge, more young Africans to knowing what happens and what action they can take about developing their own society. So Africa taking charge of our own affairs is actually very a huge step forward, because we can also get a chance to show the world what we are made of, and that given an equal platform, not even given, that being on an equal platform is actually what we should have been having from many centuries ago. So yeah, Africa needs to take control of our own resources, but we need to build serious capacity and be determined to work. One thing I know, if you go to these countries that we say are developed, you'll find that people do work. People work in almost 24 hours. Others are asleep, others are going to work. That is the way to create opportunities. Sometimes I get surprised, and I know it's because of culture, but it is very difficult to be competing with a country economy that is working 24 hours, yet sometimes on average some economies in Africa work for almost 6 hours a day. Find that people open their shops at 8 a.m., they close them at 4 or 5, and they are asleep for the rest of the time. So that is very difficult to be at the same competition table with people who have shifts. People are working 24/7. But also it is about the culture, the kind of demands in the market that we have in Africa. So with more control and without corruption, because it's again a big problem. We have had cases of African leaders, African investors, African people who are coming to Africa to also use Africa for their own benefit. We know of offshore accounts where politicians and big people steal money and they go to put them there. Now that is not taking Africa forward. People are stashing billions of dollars in their own personal accounts when the real Africans are actually suffering. So yeah, someone was saying that Africans were given independence, but they don't know how to govern themselves. It is time for us who have the knowledge, for us who have genuine intentions about our people, if we get opportunities to spread this knowledge, to even influence those who are in power, or sometimes in future when we get in power, it's important to exercise these principles to ensure that freedom does not, the autonomy in managing your affairs does not mean automatic prosperity. It will take leaders some measures to ensure that this autonomy is actually working for the interest of the people, because these leaders can also be other colonizers in their countries. They can continue exploiting workers. They can continue running the countries with their own proxies. So it will not be any difference. Yeah. So sure, control of resources is the first step. Discipline, commitment, integrity, capacity building are the next steps. Thank you.
Staying with you, Harrison, you cited that it's imperative for Africa to be able to, revamp its education system when it's talking about, the change of mindset within the African continent. How would you suggest Africa should go about that? Because we've had numerous conversations around this topic. But in your opinion, how can Africa, in a bid to reawaken the African continent, to bring them to consciousness of reality of what's happening, how can African authorities go a long way in revamping the education system that do exist and does not match with present-day society?
Yes, for a very long time, for example, we have had a lot of focus on white-collar jobs. And it has taken, for example, a country like Kenya many years for young people to start having conversation about agriculture, about artisan opportunities, because some of our curriculum is meant to train us to become people who work in offices and drive big cars in cities. So we keep our eyes fixed on working in some office somewhere, and some of the things that are very crucial to the economy, like agriculture, like even manufacturing, some levels of manufacturing are left to people who are seemed to be less ambitious and less outgoing. Yeah. You see that people who work mostly in mines, people who work in places where production is being done, they are taken to be the people who sometimes do not have a lot of business they want to do about life. But that should not be the case. We should, when you see the education systems of other countries, where, like China, for example, people at tender ages are able to do very transformative things with the knowledge they're gaining in school, even using platforms and creating platforms like TikTok and all even the phones, even the kind of technology that is in the market is worked on by citizens who are not even who have not reached very high level of education. So that is the first place we should start. We need to create a notion through our education system that work that contributes to national development is equally regarded. Yeah, we have cases where people who have done courses like catering, tourism, people who have done things like masonry at school, they are mocked and seen as people who want to do the work that does not require you to think too much. But all these industries are contributing to development. The other aspect is where our history is poorly written, and that creates the victim mentality of Africans. And low self-esteem is planted in our generations at a very young age, where people believe that sometimes you'll go to a market, and because of the notion that you have in mind, if you can't purchase anything that is written that it is made from your country, you believe that something that is foreign is the best quality. Some recent times, I know this could be a sensitive discussion, but in Kenya we had a conversation about where pads that the sanitary the towels were from outside were to be taxed, and then we promote production from the local manufacturers in our country. And there was a lot of uproar about that, because people are saying that sanitary towels that are manufactured abroad are more quality than the ones that we have locally. So that is in one way it could be true, in another way it could be a mentality that we have to believe that everything that comes from outside is the one that is the best. For example, we might have a case where now people will start viewing uranium from Niger differently, and now imagining, no, did these people from Niger do a good job? Now that is the kind of mindset that we need to eliminate through our education system, and that is through telling stories of heroism, telling stories of, like, I hear stories that in America when a child is very small, they are told about the American dream. They are told that they are the best in the world. They are told such kind of confidence building narratives, and that is what we need to build. Not telling children that Wazungus are the white people are better than us. And even teaching things like that Africans used to be referred to as monkeys. People grow up with such kind of thinking, and they succumb, such that we don't trust. Sometimes even organizations in Africa are being forced to have a white partner or a white person in the board, so that your organization can look credible and that it is doing more work. And when you look at the person who is being fronted to bring credibility to the organization, has actually not reached the level of education of the people who are fronting them. They are only fronting them because they are foreigner. So such kind of values are the ones that we need to entrench in our education system, because education is an avenue that consumes. For example, if I do quick mathematics, I've taken almost 98% of my life in school. I've been in school for 8 years, 4 years again, and I still want to continue schooling. So, school is going to take a lot of my time, and the kind of environment that I'll be exposed to at school will shape a lot of what I think about even the kind of capacities that we have. So in a nutshell, those two areas, skill-based learning and attitude change towards sustainable work opportunities, rather than just focus on white-collar jobs, is crucial. And then the change of mindsets is also very important in our education system, so that we can be able to actually know what we have and guard it and fight for it with a lot of information and capacity, so that we don't tell people to go away and we can't do anything if they leave. Sometimes people you can tell people, now don't mine our gold, go away. They go away. You are left there with your gold. What do you do with it? So we need to have that capacity to do things by ourselves.
Thank you so much, Harrison. Just to wrap up this edition of the program, Talking Points. Now, I'll conclude with you, Dr. GNAKA. Now, given that you are a founding member of the Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress, now, could you share your opinion of how relevant regional collaboration will be in this dream which Africa is headed towards, and of course, pass across to our audience the way forward for the African continent in line with the dream of Pan-Africanism, or better still, the vision of Pan-Africanism and Ubuntu?
So for me, I think Boniface gave a lot of good answers when he was responding to your last two questions. And what we need in Africa is a multi-dimensional revolution. We need a psychological revolution. We need an agricultural revolution. We need a cultural revolution. We need a political revolution. We need an economic revolution. We need a revolution on all aspects so that, we can propose a vision of an integrated development of Africa, which rests upon the Pan-African vision. There is no way those individual African countries, can compete with those federations. Mexico is a federation. Canada is a federation. India is another federation. Russia, another federation. The United States is a federation. How can a country like Lesotho, Gambia, can compete with the United States, for instance? So that's one thing. So we need to come together around a revived Pan-African vision as it was promoted, by leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Robert Sobukwe, Thomas Sankara, and Nelson Mandela, and many others, and Patrice Lumumba. Now, in the 21st century, we think that we need to come together around a new vision of Pan-Africanism that stands upon an endogenous value system, which is called the Ubuntu philosophy, which put emphasis on humanness, on solidarity and interdependence. Contrary to Kwame Nkrumah, who was promoting scientific socialism, or Nelson Mandela, who, when he became leader, was decided to side with liberalism, economic liberalism. So it is in that context of that vision, then everything that Harrison was talking about, we can do those things. We should not forget that we had good leaders, but we were destroyed by neo-colonial forces, and it is when we come together, then we can try to survive and that as we fight against the neo-colonial forces. Yes, when we embrace the Pan-African vision, when we embrace the Ubuntu philosophy, we are reconnecting with our history of resilience, a history of persistence, a history of survival, history of victories, history of capabilities and abilities of the African people who have been surviving for thousands of years, and then who survived slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and neo-colonialism, Jim Crow in the United States, and many other systems like neoliberalism. When we understand that this is our people, we are the descendants of the people who built the pyramids of Egypt. We are the descendants of those who built the Nubian civilization. We are the descendants of those who built, the Ethiopian civilization. We are the descendants of the Bantu who migrated across the continent of Africa. We are the descendants of the people who are still contributing, to the welfare of the world. There is no way we're going to have a complex of inferiority, and that's why for us, teaching Pan-Africanism, teaching about the Ubuntu philosophy, teaching about everything that we do in Africa, the stories, we have to flip, the script, so that we can see that we are the essential people in the world, who are contributing, because the sweat, the blood of the United States, the United States was built in Europe on the sweat, the blood, and the tears of the African people, and then we can do the same thing for ourselves. So this is what I can say, to conclude. Yes, we need to change the educational system, but this has to be also done. It has to be requested by the youth. Because they say they should go and tell the leaders we need to learn more about ourselves. This is only how they can impose that change of the curriculum, to the leaders, because many of the leaders were selected by the Europeans who want to advance the cause of the European grandeur and to the detriment of the African masses and the African people. So that will be my concluding remarks. It is within that context that an integrated development, which is controlled by the African people in unity, without the interference of the European world or the Western world or the NAFSOC world. This is how we can contribute to the advancement of Africa, because the world is going to become more dangerous. There is a declining Western world, and there is the rising of an alternative world, and the Europeans are becoming more nervous. We saw the war in Syria. We see that they don't want to give up even though they lost the war in Ukraine. And then by then, you are tired. You don't have any power anymore, but you thought that you needed to do that in order to show the commitment of the permanent state or the deep state of the United States in competing with China and Russia in Africa. And that's not how people should. It's not how we see it. If they really want, we have our needs. There is the trans-Saharan trade. It is there. All the roads and railroads designed, some of them are already completed on the continent of Africa. We want genuine partnership from those forces in order to help with the industrialization of Africa. This is only when we can talk about the shared prosperity on the face of the world, in the face of the world. Thank you.
Thank you immensely, Dr. GNAKA, for your participation in today's edition of Talking Point.
Thank you.
I will equally say thank you to Boniface Harrison in his capacity, who participated in his capacity as the Executive Director at MUEMACTION Post, who joined us all the way from Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're discussing the West African nation of Niger, where we focused on the recent decision by the Nigerian authorities to take over the country's uranium resources. And of course, you learned a lot from our guest this day, having Jackson Abse for presentation. Meanwhile, we urge you to stay in company of more programs on your Pan-African channel, 4U Media Africa.